Hello, this is Alex Bolton, also known as Sandy, and this is the second video in a series of videos on history for my Stevenson University class, which has been canceled because of the coronavirus epidemic. However, I hope that these videos will be of interest to other people as well. So the first video is titled, I Hate History, and it had quotation marks around it. That's not the way I feel, obviously. This video is called, I Love Cities, and it's true, I do love cities. I think, speaking in broad terms, that we can divide everybody up into people who love cities and people who love countryside. Now, I think most of us probably share some affinities for both the city and the country, but I particularly like cities. And realistically, I think every society needs a balance between their cities and the local areas, the countryside, that supplies them with food and is so essential to the existence of the cities. But let me back up to the year 400 BC, when Thucydides, ancient Greek historian, described the differences between Athens, basically an urban society in Athens, Greece, and Sparta, its bitter enemy, which was basically an agricultural society. And this is what Thucydides says. When we contemplate, he said, the great contrast between the two national characters of the Athenians living in the city of Athens and the Spartans who lived in the countryside, you will see how absolutely different they are. The Athenians are addicted to innovation, and their designs are characterized by swiftness, alike in conception and execution. Spartans, on the other hand, have a genius for keeping what they've got, and have a total lack of invention. And when forced to act, Spartans never go far enough. The Athenians are adventurous beyond their powers, and they are daring beyond their judgment. The Spartans typically attempt less than what they can reasonably accomplish. The Athenians are always quick to act. The Spartans always procrastinate. The Athenians are never at home. The Spartans never leave home. The Athenians are always trying to expand their power. The Spartans are always afraid of losing what power they already have. The Athenians are quick to grasp success and slow to give it up. They pursue every wild scheme, and when they fail, they are not discouraged, but act more energetically and with new hope. Thus, they toil on in trouble and in danger all the days of their life, and with little time for enjoyment, since they are always consumed with acquiring more. They were born into the world to take no rest themselves and to give no rest to others. On the other hand, the Spartans believed that if they lived by themselves and did no harm to others, all would be well. Let's take a specific example. According to Edward Gibbon, the historian of ancient Rome, Rome during the 2nd century of the Common Era was the greatest period of human accomplishment in all of history. For Edward Gibbon, this was the golden age, mankind's golden age. Now, I'm not one myself to follow ideas about golden ages. I don't think that mankind has ever lived in a golden age, or for that matter ever will. However, if there was a golden age, Rome in the 2nd century probably comes as close as any other. It had 4 major, maybe 5 major characteristics that I associate with cities, and I call these the 5 C's. Number 1 is cities themselves. Number 2 is commerce. Any great city, any city, has some kind of commercial network, long-distance trade, coined money, or even sometimes paper money and credit and banks, the beginnings of a capitalist system of finance. So commerce. Obviously, the Romans were able to have merchants spread across the whole of its empire, from England, Spain, France, Italy, Greece, all the way over to the Middle East. And part of that, part of the ability of the Roman Empire to maintain its commercial empire was because it had a great system of communication. It had a great system of roads. Roman roads are still being used in many places in Europe today. And it also had a system of writing, a phonetic alphabet that was one of the legacies of ancient Greece that allowed many of the common people in Rome to read and write, to learn new things, to spread new ideas. The third thing I associate with cities is centralization, some kind of centralized political authority. There's a group of people in a specific place that are making most of the major political and economic decisions. In the United States, we have several of these great centralized locations. Washington, D.C. makes political decisions. New York City we associate with the financial decisions that shape our economy. But you also have, along with centralization, some kind of consolidation of power, a hierarchical structure, and a bureaucracy of people making decisions about roads, about the military, about commerce, about a whole host of environmental issues, a whole host of issues that impact the life of everybody associated with the city and in its surrounding areas. Lastly, cities have a specific class structure. They have almost always a great social economic inequality. You have very, very wealthy people at the top, and almost always a oppressed lower class, people living in poverty, struggling to get out of poverty, struggling to stay alive. On the brighter side, you also in cities have a middle class. You have people filling the space between the upper and the lower class of society. And everybody watching this video, you are a member of this class. Unless you are fabulously wealthy or impoverished, which I don't believe any of you are, you believe in certain middle class values. You are students, you believe in education, you are ambitious, you're trying to get ahead in the world. These are characteristics oftentimes called bourgeois characteristics, the characteristics of the bourgeoisie that emphasize hard work, morality, sometimes luck. These are the things necessary to get ahead in this world, and are associated specifically with the middle class, who are ambitious, striving always to get ahead, to avoid falling into poverty, to hopefully rise up and become one of the wealthy people, one of the more wealthy people in society. Also, if you live in a city, you're used to being around many diverse people, and you develop a toleration for different people, different points of view. You keep your eyes on the prize, you do what is necessary to get ahead, and that oftentimes requires dealing with many different people and different points of view and tolerating different perspectives. As well, if you live in a city, you're much more apt to have a secular point of view as opposed to a spiritual point of view. You are driven by materialistic goals. Ideas about religion obviously might be very important in your life, but the dominant theme of your life is probably acquiring wealth. Now, so what happened to ancient Rome? Rome had all these things: cities, commerce, communication, centralization, this kind of class structure that I've described. In the beginning of these bourgeois attitudes, well, as we know, Rome falls. It's replaced by the Middle Ages in Europe, a feudal society, an agricultural society, a very cohesive spiritual society with very little commerce. There's no, I'm going to say no, but that's a little of an exaggeration, but there's no money, there's no coins, there's still a few coins circulating from from ancient Rome, but increasingly local commercial relationships. No long distance trade, no cities, no commerce, no communication system. Very few people are able to read and to write. And the class structure is very different. Instead of social classes of rich, middle class, and poor, we usually describe the social structure of the Middle Ages in terms of three estates: the aristocrats, the clergy, and the peasants. All this, I know, requires a great deal of imagination to understand the transition that occurred roughly in the 5th and 6th centuries of the Common Era, from the glory of ancient Rome, the urban civilization of Rome, to the agricultural, local, spiritual society of feudal Europe. So why is all this relevant? I think ideally in any society, any stable society, you have a balance between the city and its way of life, its way of thinking, and the countryside, the people who live in the countryside, the agriculturalists who feed the cities and who make city life possible to begin with. In American history, during the period of debate over the U.S. Constitution, the Federalists who supported the Constitution and the centralization of political authority resided in the cities, and the people who were opposed to the Constitution, the Anti-Federalists, lived outside of the cities in the rural agricultural regions of America. Later on, the U.S. Civil War was fought between the North, predominantly an urban area, against the agricultural South. Obviously, there were other issues involved, most predominantly the issue of slavery. But one way to look at the Civil War was this continuing conflict in American society between agricultural and urban America. We see the conflict again with the rise of the populists, the farmers in the Midwest who struck out against the Northeast businessmen who lived in the cities. In the previous video, we talked about the importance of historical relevance. And I think we can see this theme of the conflict, sometimes the balance, ideally a balance between agricultural regions and urban regions in our present political situation. America now is divided, polarized between the red states and the blue states. The red states, the agricultural rural heartland America, and the blue states, which are predominantly the urban centers on the coast. Ideally, a stable society has a balance between its agricultural regions and its urban areas. That balance today is definitely going through some kind of period of transformation. And it will be interesting to see how this is resolved. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and we'll watch the next one. Thank you for watching.